March 8, 2024, 11:32 p.m., Bogota, Colombia. Emergency sirens pierced through the upscale neighborhood of Rosales as patrol units rushed toward a colonial-style home surrounded by jacaranda trees. Officers pushed through the wrought iron gate, their boots echoing against terracotta tiles still wet from the evening rain. Inside the master bedroom, they found Judge Roberto Mendoza kneeling beside his wife's body, his hands stained crimson, his tailored shirt soaked through. Ana Sofia Mendoza lay motionless on the Persian rug, her white nightgown drenched in blood. 66 stab wounds, the coroner would later count. 66 moments of rage that transformed a respected magistrate into a killer. When officers asked what happened, Roberto looked up with hollow eyes and whispered in a voice barely audible, "She destroyed everything, everything we built." Within hours, the story would dominate every news channel from Cartagena to Cali. Distinguished judge murders wife in crime of passion. But the truth, the real truth, lay buried in a secret that would take investigators weeks to uncover, hidden in the shadows of a family that valued reputation above honesty. Medellin, Colombia. Early 1990s. The Mendoza household sat perched on a hillside in the El Poblado district, where bougainvillea climbed over wrought iron balconies and the smell of fresh arepas drifted through open windows every morning. In that home lived two brothers whose futures seemed predetermined from birth. Roberto, the eldest, carried himself with the seriousness of someone twice his age. Even at 12, he spoke in measured sentences and kept his school uniform pressed without being told. His younger brother, Sebastian, was his opposite. Loud, impulsive, and perpetually in motion, he filled rooms with laughter and chaos in equal measure. Their father, a retired army colonel, ran the household with military precision. Discipline was not negotiable. Respect was earned through obedience. Their mother, a devout Catholic who attended Mass 3 times weekly, believed that family honor was sacred and that any crack in their public image was a sin against God and heritage. At dinner, conversation always circled back to Roberto's achievements. First place in the debate tournament again, their father would announce, chest swelling with pride. Then turning to Sebastian with a frown, "Perhaps you should learn from your brother's example." Those words, meant as guidance, landed like stones on Sebastian's chest. His report cards came back marked with average grades and notes about his lack of focus. His attempts at humor were met with correction. Even when he scored the winning goal in a neighborhood soccer match, his father simply reminded him that sports would not pay for university. No one noticed how Sebastian's smile faded a little more each time Roberto was praised. No one saw how comparison became the language of their home. Roberto's world revolved around structure and control. He loved rules, precision, and the satisfaction of being acknowledged as exceptional. Sebastian loved attention, not from vanity, but because he rarely received it unless he misbehaved. When their father disciplined him, Roberto was often held up as the standard. He would nod seriously, unaware that his perfection carved the distance between them deeper with every passing year. What began as sibling rivalry hardened into something darker. By the mid-90s, the brothers had grown into two different versions of the same strict upbringing. Roberto wore responsibility like armor. Sebastian wore rebellion like a badge, hoping someone would finally notice him for who he was instead of who he failed to become. Teachers called Roberto exceptional. They called Sebastian distracted, though the tone carried disappointment. When Roberto won a national essay competition in 1996, their mother framed the newspaper clipping and hung it in the sala where every visitor could see it. Sebastian's name appeared nowhere on those walls. "Why can't you be more like your brother?" became the family refrain, repeated so often it lost its sting and simply became fact. When Roberto graduated with honors from Universidad de los Andes, their father stood tall in his formal suit, pride radiating from every gesture. Sebastian clapped from the audience, his jaw tight, tears forming not from joy, but from the crushing realization that no matter what he did, he would always exist in someone else's shadow. Years later, mutual friends would remember Sebastian's silence that day. One of them recalled, "You could tell he loved Roberto, but it was the kind of love that hurt to carry." The weight of constant comparison became the foundation of a resentment neither brother fully acknowledged. Through his 20s, Roberto stayed on a flawless path. Law school, judicial clerkship, rapid promotion through Colombia's court system. His discipline never wavered. But Sebastian drifted from one ambition to another. First journalism, then marketing, then a brief attempt at opening a cafe in Chapinero. None lasted. Friends remembered him as charming but unfocused. Bills piled up. Phone calls to his brother shifted from casual conversation to requests for loans. Roberto always helped, but his tone made it sound like charity. "You need to get serious, Sebastian," he would say, his voice carrying the authority of an older brother who had already given up on hearing new excuses. Sebastian's responses were clipped. "Not everyone gets it right on the first try, Roberto." Behind those words lived a bitterness he could never fully admit. The years between them stretched wider. Roberto became the family's proof that discipline worked. Sebastian became the reminder that not everyone could meet those standards. Their father's death in 2009 brought them back under one roof for a week, long enough for old tensions to resurface. During the velorio, their mother held both sons' hands and said, "Promise me you will look after each other." Roberto promised immediately. Sebastian did not answer. By 2012, their mother's health began to fail. Hospital visits were filled with polite small talk between brothers who no longer knew what to say beyond surface pleasantries. Sebastian stayed overnight when Roberto could not. He helped with medications, read from prayer books, and for the first time in years felt useful. The nurses said he was gentle and patient. Roberto saw only disorganization, pills not arranged properly, appointments sometimes missed. One evening, he gently scolded Sebastian for forgetting to refill a prescription. "Mama depends on precision," he said. Sebastian's reply was quiet but sharp. "Not everything can be fixed with a checklist." Their mother passed away 2 months later. At the funeral, they stood side by side in matching dark suits, united in grief yet miles apart in heart. Afterward, Roberto returned to his rising career in Bogotá, carrying the Mendoza legacy forward with him. Sebastian stayed behind in Medellín, working part-time jobs that barely covered rent. Neighbors noticed him walking alone through Parque Lleras at dusk, earbuds in, expression blank. He used to be so full of life, one recalled later, but after his mother died, it was like something inside him switched off. When bills fell behind, Roberto stepped in again, wiring money, paying several months of rent, never asking how things had gotten that bad. But every transfer came with unspoken judgment. Sebastian felt it in every terse message. "Take care of yourself" sounded less like concern and more like disappointment wrapped in courtesy. Family meant everything to the Mendozas, but only when it looked respectable from the outside. Reputation was their religion. Being honorable mattered more than being honest. For Roberto, maintaining that image was survival, the only way he knew to make sense of a world where weakness had consequences. For Sebastian, it became a curse. He learned early that to be seen, he would have to disrupt the picture his family worked so hard to frame. When Roberto was appointed as a circuit judge in 2016, national newspapers ran glowing profiles. They called him the future of Colombian justice. That same week, Sebastian's electricity was shut off for non-payment. The contrast could not have been sharper. Friends say Sebastian sent a congratulatory message, short, formal, unanswered. He did not attend the celebration dinner. "It was his moment," Sebastian told a friend later. "I didn't want to be the reminder of everything he worked so hard not to become." Over the next few years, contact dwindled to birthdays and Christmas. When they did speak, conversations were full of politeness and uncomfortable pauses. Yet beneath every word, resentment simmered. Roberto carried pride for what he had built. Sebastian carried pain for what he had lost. Attention, affection, and the belief that he mattered just as much. In 2019, when Sebastian finally moved to Bogotá, Roberto offered to help him settle. He bought him groceries, gave him spare furniture, introduced him to professional contacts in the city. To everyone else, it looked like generosity. but to Sebastian it felt like pity wrapped in obligation. "I'm not your charity case," he said one evening when Roberto tried to offer rent money. Roberto did not argue. He just sighed and said, "You need stability, Sebastian. You can't keep running from it." That sentence would echo for years, because soon it would not be Sebastian running. Their story began like so many others, two brothers raised under pressure, one shining, one struggling. But buried beneath their shared past was a fracture no one could see, a toxic mix of envy, duty, and silence that would one day turn catastrophic. By 2024, that unspoken tension would resurface in ways neither of them could have imagined. What no one in the Mendoza family could predict was how much damage one childhood sentence, repeated endlessly, could cause decades later. Why can't you be more like your brother? That question, asked enough times, becomes a wound. And wounds that never heal eventually demand attention in the most destructive ways possible. Bogota, Colombia, spring 2014. The grand ballroom of the Hotel Casa Medina buzzed with quiet ambition. Judges, prosecutors, and defense attorneys gathered for the annual legal forum, a night where professional courtesy disguised political maneuvering and first impressions could shape entire careers. Among the elegantly dressed crowd, Judge Roberto Mendoza stood out not because he sought attention, but because he commanded it naturally. His reputation preceded him. Confident, articulate, every gesture controlled. He was known for his sharp legal reasoning and his ability to silence a courtroom without raising his voice. That evening, his conversation was interrupted by a woman he had only seen in passing before. Ana Sofia Restrepo, a rising prosecutor from the Fiscalia General, with a commanding presence that matched his own. She introduced herself with a firm handshake and direct eye contact. "Judge Mendoza, I have been wanting to meet the man who terrifies half the defense bar in this city," she said, her tone professional but warm. Roberto's expression softened slightly, the closest thing to amusement he allowed in public settings. "And you must be the prosecutor who convinced a jury that circumstantial evidence was stronger than an alibi," he replied. They both smiled. A rare human moment in a room full of rehearsed charm. It was not flirtation, it was recognition, the kind that grows between two people who see discipline and dedication reflected in each other. That first conversation lasted nearly 90 minutes. They discussed legal theories, their shared frustration with bureaucratic inefficiency, and their mutual belief that justice was about protecting society, not winning cases. Later, Roberto would tell a colleague, "She is formidable. You can feel she means every word she says." Ana Sofia, for her part, told a friend, "He speaks like someone who still believes the law can change lives, not just punish them." That was the beginning of something neither had planned. Over the following months, they crossed paths often at conferences, courthouse hallways, and legal charity events. What began as professional respect evolved into quiet admiration. Roberto admired Ana Sofia's unwavering moral compass. She admired his intellectual precision and calm authority. Their first dinner was not planned. A conversation after a late hearing turned into coffee at a café in La Candelaria, then dinner at Andrés Carne de Res, then 3 more hours of talking about life beyond courtrooms and case files. They found comfort in each other's structure, her decisiveness balanced by his patience. By early 2015, they were inseparable. Roberto proposed that winter during a weekend trip to Villa de Leyva. According to friends, he did not kneel dramatically. He simply held her hands as they stood on a cobblestone street under colonial archways and said, "You do not have to carry everything alone. Let me help you." For a woman who had built her career on independence and strength, those words meant everything. She said yes without hesitation. Their wedding the following year drew attention from the entire Bogota legal community. Newspapers called them the power couple of Colombian justice. Colleagues admired how they seemed perfectly matched. Intellect meeting conviction, discipline meeting compassion. At the reception held in a restored hacienda near Zipaquira, cameras flashed as they danced to vallenato music. Ana Sofia wore elegance with simplicity. Roberto could not take his eyes off her. But among the crowd of smiling faces, one pair of eyes watched differently. Sebastian Mendoza stood near the bar, his suit slightly ill-fitting, his glass refilled more often than appropriate. He had not been close to his brother for years, but family obligation demanded attendance. As the music played, he studied the woman his brother had just married. The confidence in her posture, the warmth in her voice when she greeted guests, the way she steadied Roberto's hand as they moved through the crowd. A friend later recalled Sebastian whispering almost to himself, "She treats him like he is made of something precious." When asked about his first impression of Ana Sofia, Sebastian later wrote in a private journal entry dated May 22, 2016. "She spoke to me like I existed, like my presence mattered. No one has done that in years." The words were simple but carried enormous weight, admiration twisted with longing, even if he did not yet understand it fully. In photographs from that night, Sebastian stands off to the side of group pictures, smiling faintly, eyes distant. Family members described him as emotional, proud of his brother, but those who knew him well noticed something else. The look of someone silently comparing his life to another's and finding his own lacking. Roberto, composed and radiant, represented everything Sebastian had been told he was not. Stable, admired, accomplished. Ana Sofia's kindness only sharpened the contrast. She greeted Sebastian warmly that night, thanked him sincerely for helping coordinate some logistics with distant relatives, and offered him a genuine smile that lingered just long enough to leave an imprint. "You are Roberto's brother, right?" she said kindly. "He is lucky to have family like you." It was a harmless comment, but to Sebastian it sounded like recognition he had waited his entire life to hear. As months passed, the Mendozas became a symbol of professional and personal success. Their marriage fit the image both had cultivated, disciplined, graceful, free of scandal. They lived in a beautiful apartment in Chico with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Andes. Neighbors described them as polite, private, and punctual. Every morning at 6:30, Roberto reviewed legal briefs over Tinto while Ana Sofia prepared for court hearings. Evenings were for shared dinners, often ajiaco or bandeja paisa, and quiet conversations about their cases. There were no raised voices, no slammed doors. It was the kind of harmony most couples spent years chasing. They volunteered together at legal aid clinics in Ciudad Bolívar, donated to programs for displaced families from rural violence, and attended charity galas supporting victims of armed conflict. Roberto was admired for his impartiality and intellect, often quoted in El Tiempo about his commitment to judicial integrity. Ana Sofia was respected for her relentless pursuit of justice, known for prosecuting corruption cases others avoided. Together, they were the picture of balance, logic and conviction, intellect and heart. But that balance came at a cost. Behind closed doors, their marriage was more professional than affectionate. Ana Sofia scheduled their lives with precision, everything timed, organized, predictable. Roberto respected her need for structure, but sometimes he missed spontaneity. He would suggest weekend trips to Cartagena or quiet movie nights, only to hear, "Maybe next month. I have depositions to prepare." Friends noticed his patience, but also the weariness in his eyes. "He adored her," a colleague said later, "but it was like living with a machine that loved you back in perfectly measured doses." Ana Sofia's world revolved around reputation and duty. She did not know how to rest. Her upbringing had taught her that idleness was weakness, and weakness was failure. Roberto tried to understand, even admired it at times, but the distance between their emotional worlds slowly grew. Still, in public, they never faltered. At legal events, they stood side by side, graceful, composed, untouchable. Sebastian, meanwhile, watched from the margins. He visited occasionally, always with polite smiles and brief stays. To him, Roberto seemed more mechanical than ever, a man whose success left no space for vulnerability. But Ana Sofia was different. She noticed him. She asked how he was adjusting to Bogota, offered to help him network professionally, and even invited him to dinner once when Roberto was working late. It was nothing inappropriate, just human decency. Yet to Sebastian, that decency felt intoxicating. "She does not talk down to me," he once told a friend. "When she asks how I am doing, it actually sounds like she cares." Roberto's perfection made it easy for Sebastian to misinterpret Ana Sofia's kindness as something more. Where Roberto offered structure, Sebastian imagined she felt trapped. Where Ana Sofia showed empathy, Sebastian imagined understanding that went deeper. It was not love, not yet, but it was enough to light the first quiet spark of something that would later destroy them all. By early 2020, Bogota was emerging from another turbulent year. Political protests had filled the streets, and the economy had left many struggling to keep their footing. Sebastian Mendoza's life had unraveled once again. A failed business venture, unpaid rent, and a series of broken promises left him standing at his brother's apartment door with a single suitcase and an apologetic expression. Roberto, now 7 years into his judgeship, opened that door the way he always had, with controlled compassion and barely concealed frustration. "It is just until I find something stable," Sebastian said quietly, eyes downcast. Ana Sofia, standing beside her husband, nodded with genuine warmth. "You are family, Sebastian. You are welcome here." Those words would become the first small crack in a home that once felt untouchable. At first, things seemed manageable. Sebastian made himself useful around the apartment. He prepared breakfast, kept common areas tidy, and tried not to be a burden. To anyone watching, he looked like a man grateful for a second chance. But what began as temporary soon stretched indefinitely. Days turned into weeks, then months. Roberto's demanding court schedule kept him away from sunrise until well past sunset. Ana Sofia worked long hours preparing prosecutions, often bringing case files home. It was in those quiet stretches, the clatter of dishes, the hum of the coffee maker, that Sebastian began to settle into a rhythm he was not supposed to have. Ana Sofia noticed his efforts and thanked him often. "You did not have to clean the entire kitchen, Sebastian," she told him one morning after finding everything organized. He smiled softly and replied, "You both work too hard. Someone has to keep this place from falling apart." She laughed lightly, unaware that every kind word fed something inside him he did not know how to control. Roberto treated him with distant politeness, always maintaining the invisible line that separated family obligation from genuine connection. Ana Sofia, however, spoke to Sebastian like he was a person, not a problem. She asked about his day, listened when he talked about his past struggles, and never made him feel like a failure. To a man who had spent his entire life being compared unfavorably to his brother, that basic human decency felt like sunlight after years in shadow. The household ran with precision. Dinner was always at 7:30, followed by an hour of case review. Sebastian admired that discipline initially, even tried to match it, but he also saw how rigid it felt. During one family dinner, Roberto corrected Ana Sofia mid-sentence about a procedural detail she had mentioned. His tone was not harsh, but it was final, leaving no room for discussion. The table went quiet for several seconds before she simply nodded and changed the subject. Sebastian caught the faint tension in her expression, and something shifted inside him. Later, when they cleared the table together, he said softly, "You do not always have to let him correct you." Ana Sofia smiled politely but looked uncomfortable. "Roberto does not mean anything by it. That is just how he processes things." Sebastian did not respond, but in that silence something was already forming. Over the following weeks, he began noticing every small interaction between them. The clipped tone Roberto used when Ana Sofia forgot something minor. The polite but emotionless goodnight kiss. The way their conversations often turned into subtle corrections disguised as guidance. What others would recognize as a typical marriage between two driven professionals, Sebastian saw as proof that Ana Sofia was unappreciated, taken for granted, emotionally neglected. In his mind, he started constructing a different narrative, one where he was the person who truly understood her. She deserves someone who listens, he whispered to himself one night as he folded laundry in the guest room. It was a harmless thought at first. Roberto's nature did not help. He was kind to everyone, especially those who seemed to need support. When Sebastian received a rejection email from a job he had hoped for, Roberto barely looked up from his legal briefs. But Ana Sofia brought him coffee and said gently, "You will find your place, Sebastian. You are more capable than you think." The moment was brief, but it lived in his mind for days. He replayed her tone, her words, the kindness in her eyes. It was not love, not yet, but it was something he had not felt in years. Importance, visibility, mattering to someone. In his journal dated April 19, 2020, he wrote, "When she looks at me, I feel real, like I exist beyond being Roberto's failure of a brother. If he loved her the way she deserves, maybe I would not feel this way." The apartment that once felt like Roberto's domain slowly became a stage for Sebastian's growing fantasy. He started waking earlier to make coffee before Ana Sofia came into the kitchen, timing it perfectly so she would see him waiting. He asked about her cases, learned the names of defendants and witnesses, made small talk about prosecutorial strategy, subjects he barely cared about before. She thought he was simply trying to connect and find common ground. He thought it meant they were connecting on a deeper level. At family gatherings with extended Mendoza relatives, people noticed how easily he laughed at Ana Sofia's comments and how she politely shifted conversations when he leaned too close during group photos. No one said anything directly. Roberto was too preoccupied with an overwhelming caseload to notice subtle changes in household dynamics. His docket was filled with high-profile criminal cases, and his calendar stretched impossibly thin. Even when he was home physically, his focus remained on legal documents and appellate briefs. When Ana Sofia mentioned feeling emotionally distant, he brushed it off with logic. "We both knew what these careers would demand when we married." Sebastian overheard that exchange once as he passed through the hallway, and the seed that had been planted months earlier grew stronger, deeper roots. He told himself he was not jealous. He was simply recognizing what Roberto failed to see, that his wife was lonely, unappreciated, deserving of more attention than legal precedents and courtroom strategies. By the summer of 2020, tension filled the spaces no one discussed openly. Sebastian lingered in rooms longer than appropriate. Ana Sofia tried to maintain boundaries, but sometimes found herself in conversations that felt uncomfortably personal. One evening, as Bogotá's evening rain tapped against the windows, Sebastian sat across from her at the kitchen table and said quietly, "You know, he does not really see you. He sees the role you fill in his life." Ana Sofia looked up, confused and uncomfortable. "That is not true, Sebastian," she said firmly. "Roberto loves me." Sebastian smiled faintly, his voice soft but insistent. "I did not say he does not love you. I said he does not see you." She ended the conversation immediately, excusing herself to her office. But the discomfort lingered like humidity after rain. A week later, Roberto confided in a judicial colleague over lunch near the Palacio de Justicia. "Things are tense at home. I think Sebastian is struggling more than he admits. I do not know how to help without making things worse." His colleague, an older judge with decades of experience, advised distance. Kindness gets misread, Roberto, especially by those who feel they have nothing. Roberto agreed in principle, but maintaining that boundary had already come too late. Sebastian had already mistaken basic human decency for something it was not, transforming ordinary compassion into the foundation of an obsession that would soon demand to be seen. By the start of 2023, Judge Roberto Mendoza had become one of the most recognizable figures in Colombia's judicial system. His courtroom operated with mechanical efficiency. Sharp, precise, and unforgiving when it came to criminal sentencing, he presided over cases involving organized crime, corruption, and violent offenses, and his rulings often made national headlines. Some called him fair, others called him cold. El Tiempo once described him as the unyielding face of Colombian justice. Social media comments flooded in after one televised corruption trial. Judge without heart destroys families for headlines. It was meant to wound, and it did. But Roberto would never admit that publicly. Every ruling was supported by legal precedent. Every decision, he told himself, was about law, not emotion. Still, when he returned home at night, the silence after those judgments began to sound louder than any applause ever had. The weight of the gavel grew heavier with each passing month. Every verdict created new enemies, families of convicted criminals who wanted his name destroyed. Anonymous threats slipped through courthouse security. Late-night calls from blocked numbers. His staff filtered most messages before they reached him, but some slipped through anyway. "You do not deserve to judge anyone," one voicemail hissed. "You are ruining lives because you can." He deleted it immediately, but the voice stayed with him for days. The respect that once felt empowering now felt suffocating. How could someone who built his entire identity on justice begin to doubt whether he still believed in it? At home, Ana Sofia saw the changes first. He would arrive late, drop his briefcase by the door, and walk straight to his study without a word. The warmth that once filled their apartment faded into polite coexistence. Dinners became silent affairs. 2 plates, minimal eye contact, conversations about work that never touched anything real. When she finally confronted him one evening, her voice was gentle but firm. "Roberto, are you okay? You have not been yourself for months." He answered without looking up from his files. "I am fine, just exhausted." But he was not fine. He was withdrawing, the way people do when the world demands more than they have left to give. Ana Sofia suggested they speak with someone, maybe a counselor who specialized in professional burnout. "You are carrying too much alone," she said softly. He turned to her, his expression weary but resolute. "I solve problems, Ana Sofia. I do not have them." That line became his shield and her heartbreak. The emotional distance between them grew silently, the kind you do not notice until the gap becomes too wide to cross. Roberto tried small gestures, leaving notes on her desk, preparing dinner when his schedule allowed, suggesting a weekend away in Cartagena. But Ana Sofia barely noticed. Her caseload had become overwhelming, and her own career had become an escape from emotional connection that required energy she no longer had. When she did sleep, it was not rest. It was recovery from exhaustion. By early spring 2023, tension in the apartment had settled like dust over everything. Even minor disagreements sounded sharper than they should. Roberto wanted to take a weekend trip. She said no, explaining she had witness depositions to prepare. When he pressed gently, she snapped. "This is not about you, Roberto. Some of us have responsibilities we cannot postpone." Then came silence, the kind that feels colder than anger. That summer, something disrupted their fragile routine. Sebastian, who had moved out nearly 2 years earlier after finding sporadic work, returned. The message he sent was brief and deliberately vague. "I need to start over. Can I stay for a while?" Roberto hesitated, remembering the tension from the last time, but Ana Sofia agreed almost immediately. "Family takes care of family," she said, a statement that sounded noble but came from guilt. Deep down, she knew she had been emotionally distant during his previous stay, too consumed by work to offer real support. When Sebastian arrived, he looked different. Thinner, quieter, but with a familiar charm that made people lower their defenses. He said his last job had ended badly, and he needed time to figure things out. Ana Sofia offered the guest room without hesitation. Roberto helped carry in boxes, unaware that this decision would mark the beginning of everything unraveling. At first, the arrangement seemed peaceful. Sebastian helped around the apartment, prepared meals, filled the silence Roberto and Ana Sofia had grown accustomed to. His presence even lightened the atmosphere temporarily. But Roberto could not shake the feeling that something about this second stay felt different. Sebastian seemed more reserved, more observant. He asked subtle questions about Ana Sofia's work schedule, her stress levels, her routines. When Roberto tried to dismiss the discomfort, Sebastian would say casually, "She works so hard. You are lucky to have her." It sounded innocent, but the tone carried something that made Roberto uneasy. Ana Sofia, as usual, was too distracted to notice anything unusual. She was in the middle of prosecuting a high-profile corruption case involving former government officials. Every decision was being scrutinized publicly, every move analyzed by media outlets. The attention fed her anxiety. At home, she avoided discussing the case in detail, saying only, "People do not understand what it takes to do this work properly." She was not wrong, but what she failed to realize was that the work was slowly consuming her entire identity. Roberto told a close colleague over drinks near Zona Rosa, "It feels like I am living with someone I used to know." His friend advised patience, assuring him she would find balance again. But patience does not repair emotional distance. It only delays confrontation. The more isolated Ana Sofia became, the more space Sebastian filled. He made sure to be present, to listen when she vented about difficult witnesses, to offer warmth where Roberto could not. It is difficult to pinpoint exactly when the shift began, but by late 2023, the apartment no longer felt like Roberto's alone. The man who commanded courtrooms with authority could not maintain peace in his own home. His gavel meant nothing here. And that is where something inside Sebastian finally crystallized. He had spent months watching his brother's marriage deteriorate, watching Ana Sofia grow lonelier despite being surrounded by legal brilliance, watching Roberto become a stranger to his own wife. And in those observations, Sebastian found something he had been searching for his entire life. An opportunity. Not to win Ana Sofia's love, he had long ago realized that was impossible, but to destroy the perfect image his brother had always maintained. To prove that Roberto, the golden son, the respected judge, was not untouchable. If he could not have what Roberto had, then Roberto should not have it either. By late 2023, Sebastian had made up his mind. He simply had not found his method yet. The resentment that had simmered for decades was no longer something he could ignore. It demanded action, demanded to be seen. He did not need to convince Ana Sofia to betray Roberto. He only needed to convince Roberto that she already had. Once that belief took hold, the rest would happen on its own. The first step was to make the lie look real. And in the digital age, reality could be manufactured one message at a time. He began planning carefully, methodically, the way someone does when they have finally found purpose after years of drifting. He would create women who did not exist. He would plant evidence where none belonged. He would watch as his brother's perfect life crumbled, not from outside forces, but from the one thing Roberto valued most: his own certainty, his own judgment, his own unshakable belief that he was always right. By December 2023, Sebastian had begun executing his plan with meticulous care. The first step was creating women who did not exist. He searched through public social media accounts for photos of real women who lived far from Bogotá, in cities like Barranquilla or Cali, just distant enough to avoid accidental recognition. He saved their photos, created new profiles under generic names, and built complete personas. Favorite music, vacation pictures, common slang pulled from comment sections. They did not need to be perfect. They just needed to look real enough to raise suspicion. On January 9th, 2024, he sent the first message to Ana Sofia's professional email. Short, deliberately suggestive. "Last night was unforgettable. I cannot stop thinking about you." Ana Sofia read the message, frowned in confusion, and replied immediately, "You have the wrong person. Do not contact me again." She deleted it and mentioned it to Roberto that evening as a strange mistake. He dismissed it without concern. But deletion did not erase the seed Sebastian planned to plant. When that single message failed to provoke the reaction he imagined, he escalated. He created more profiles using different photos and varying tones, as if multiple women were reaching out to her. Some messages were flirtatious, others emotional and desperate. One read, "I know you feel this too. Stop pretending we do not matter." Another appeared as a comment on one of her public posts about a successful prosecution, with 3 rose emojis and the words, "Proud of you as always." Ana Sofia blocked the accounts as quickly as they appeared, but blocking was not protection against perception. Now there was a pattern forming, something Roberto began to notice. Sebastian watched from across the apartment as Roberto scrolled through Ana Sofia's phone one evening. His brow furrowed, his expression concerned. "Who are these people?" Roberto asked quietly. "I have no idea," she answered honestly, her voice carrying frustration. "Just random accounts. I keep blocking them." The messages did not remain only digital. They began appearing in physical spaces where intention became harder to dismiss. By February 2024, Ana Sofia had started using a shared office space for sensitive case preparation. One afternoon when she returned to the apartment, a small gift was tucked inside her work bag, something she did not remember receiving. Inside was an expensive perfume and a handwritten note in elegant script. "For next time we meet," she showed it to Roberto, her confusion genuine and her concern visible. "I do not know where this came from," she said. Roberto wanted to believe her, desperately wanted to dismiss it as a mistake, but doubt had begun its quiet work. Sebastian observed the hesitation in his brother's eyes, the pause before Roberto nodded and said he believed her. That pause told Sebastian everything he needed to know. The foundation was cracking. As winter turned to early spring, the manipulation sharpened with surgical precision. Sebastian began timing messages to appear when Roberto could see notification lights on Ana Sofia's phone. He left his own device face down in common spaces, confident no one would think to check his activity. He commented on her social media posts when Roberto was nearby, nothing dramatic, just suggestive enough to make someone look twice. The uncomfortable truth was how subtle everything remained. This was not chaos. It was erosion, a slow removal of trust grain by grain. When trust thins, imagination fills the void. Roberto did not confront Ana Sofia immediately. He did what people who fear being wrong often do. He watched. He paid attention to how quickly she responded to certain messages. He studied her reactions when notifications arrived. He analyzed the way she explained her day, searching for inconsistencies that were not there. And Sebastian, who moved silently through the apartment like a ghost, noticed every flicker of doubt rise in his brother's expression. One night in late February, Roberto asked carefully, "Ana Sofia, is there something you need to tell me?" She looked up from her files, genuinely confused. "About what?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "Nothing. Forget it." The conversation ended there, not because either wanted it to, but because neither knew how to continue without sounding paranoid or guilty. But messages and gifts were not enough. Suspicion could be denied. Accusations could be explained away. Sebastian needed something tangible, something physical that would speak louder than any denial. And on March 6, 2024, he found his moment. Ana Sofia had a formal judicial dinner that evening, one of those obligatory events Roberto chose not to attend due to a scheduling conflict. Sebastian volunteered to run errands and asked to borrow Ana Sofia's car, claiming his motorcycle needed repairs. She handed him the keys without hesitation, distracted by preparation for her evening event. He drove to a shopping center in Usaquén, purchased the items on the list she had given him, kept the receipt carefully. Then he parked in a corner of the lot where security cameras had limited angles. From his backpack, he pulled out a folded piece of clothing he had purchased days earlier from a street market. Men's underwear, bright blue, a size and style Roberto would never wear, chosen specifically so it could never be mistaken as belonging to the judge. Sebastian lifted the driver's seat cushion just enough to slip the garment underneath, positioned so it would be visible if someone leaned down to retrieve something from the floor. The action took less than 15 seconds, but those 15 seconds rewrote 3 lives forever. That evening, Ana Sofia returned home before Roberto, who was working late on a sentencing memo. She went to retrieve her phone charger from the car, keys still in her hand. She opened the driver's door. leaned down to check under the seat where she thought it had fallen and saw it. Not a text message, not a social media comment. Something she could touch, something that did not belong in her car or her marriage. The silence in that parking garage was the kind no one hears but everyone feels. She stood frozen, her breath shallow, her mind racing through impossible explanations. From the apartment window above, Sebastian watched her silhouette through the garage's dim lighting. He did not blink. He did not look away. He simply waited to see whether she would break quietly or call Roberto immediately. Either outcome served his purpose. The trap had been set, and now all he had to do was wait for it to close. March 8th, 2024. 9:47 p.m. The apartment was quiet. The type of quiet that usually meant a long day had ended. But for Roberto, the silence felt different tonight. Ana Sofia stood in the living room holding the blue underwear she had found in her car earlier that day. Her hands trembled slightly, but her expression was controlled, prosecutorial. Roberto came through the door, loosening his tie, and froze when he saw what she held. "What is that?" he asked, genuine confusion washing over his face. Her voice was thin, strained. "You tell me, Roberto. I found it in my car." He stepped forward, bewildered. "I have no idea where that came from. Ana Sofia, I swear to you." But she cut him off, her composure cracking. "Do not lie to me. Not after everything." He raised his hands slowly, like approaching something fragile about to shatter. "Listen to me. I have never been with anyone else. I would never do that to you." His voice cracked with desperation. She shook her head, tears forming. "You are doing exactly what defendants do. Deny everything even when the evidence is in front of you." He moved closer, reaching for her arm. "You are assuming guilt without listening. Let us talk about this rationally." Her voice rose. "Rationally? You want me to be rational when I find this in my car?" The argument escalated rapidly. Voices raised. A glass fell and shattered. Roberto tried to calm her, his hands on her shoulders. "Ana Sofia, breathe, please, just listen to me." But she was beyond hearing. She reached behind her to the kitchen counter where a knife lay from earlier meal preparation. It was not chosen. It was simply there. The first strike came before either understood what was happening. Roberto gasped, hands flying to his chest. The second followed immediately. By the time rational thought could intervene, it was too late. 66 wounds, the coroner would later document. 66 moments driven not by hatred but by devastation, by the collapse of everything she believed was true. Neighbors reported hearing a scream that did not sound like rage but like grief, like someone watching their entire world disintegrate. When police arrived at 10:32 p.m., they found Ana Sofia sitting on the floor beside Roberto's body, her clothes saturated, her hands covered in drying blood. She was not crying. She stared at nothing. Her voice was barely audible. "He destroyed us. He destroyed everything." As officers gently placed her in handcuffs, she whispered, "Ask him. Just ask him." As if Roberto could still answer, as if truth could still be retrieved. The investigation began immediately, and detectives noticed something inconsistent. No evidence of an affair existed anywhere. Not in phone records, credit card statements, or travel history. Roberto's routine had never varied. When the cyber unit traced the anonymous messages, every single one led back to prepaid devices purchased with cash. But IP logs revealed they all originated from the same location, the Mendoza apartment, during hours when Sebastian was home alone. Store surveillance showed him buying the prepaid phone. The underwear matched a purchase from a street vendor near his usual haunts. When confronted, Sebastian initially tried to maintain innocence, but faced with irrefutable digital evidence, he finally broke. "I just wanted him to feel what I felt my whole life," he said quietly, tears streaming. Invisible, worthless, like nothing he did mattered. His voice cracked. "I did not think she would actually kill him. I just wanted to ruin what he had." When detectives showed Ana Sofia the evidence, she read every line in silence. The fake profiles, the planted messages, the manufactured affair that never existed, the underwear she had believed without question. She whispered hoarsely, "I killed my husband because of something that was never real." For the first time in her prosecutorial career, the woman who had built her life pursuing truth sat face to face with a lie she had believed completely. Roberto's parents attended every day of the trial, their faces lined with permanent grief. Ana Sofia was convicted of voluntary manslaughter, the jury acknowledging emotional collapse rather than premeditation. 15 years. Sebastian received 8 years for obstruction, fraud, and reckless endangerment. During sentencing, the judge looked at him with disgust. "You destroyed a family from within using nothing but envy and deception." In her final statement, Ana Sofia stood slowly and said, "The tragedy of this case is that truth came too late, and now all that remains is what cannot be undone." She looked toward the empty seat where Roberto once sat during her trials, then sat down again. From prison, she refused all of Sebastian's letters, every envelope returned unopened. Roberto's parents established a foundation in his name, providing mental health resources for legal professionals and digital literacy training to prevent identity manipulation. The foundation's mission statement read, "No one should lose their life because doubt went unquestioned." In the end, 3 lives were destroyed. Roberto lost everything to a lie. Ana Sofia lost the man she loved to her own certainty. And Sebastian finally got what he wanted, his brother's attention. But it came at a price none of them could have imagined, and in a courtroom where justice was served, but healing would never come.